You know that $28 lunch you sometimes grab without really thinking about it?
Hmm.
What if it's like more than just lunch? What if it's actually a hidden roadblock stopping you from building real wealth?
That's a powerful thought.
Right. So today we're diving into how maybe one tiny shift, plus some of Kevin O'Leary's famously blunt advice,
Mhm.
could genuinely reshape your financial future.
Exactly. We've gone through the sources you sent, especially those really candid interviews with O'Leary, to pull out the essential lessons, the stuff about money, business, life from Mr. Wonderful himself.
Right.
Our mission today is basically to give you a shortcut to understanding his core ideas for, well, building wealth and achieving success.
And I bet some of it's pretty counterintuitive.
Oh, definitely. Get ready for some advice that's simple, maybe surprisingly so, but incredibly powerful.
Okay, let's get into it. Our journey into Mr. Wonderful's world. It doesn't start on Shark Tank, interestingly enough.
No, it starts much closer to home.
It starts with his mother, Georgette O'Leary. He says she was the bedrock of his whole financial way of thinking.
Absolutely. And her results, I mean, he calls them extraordinary. She managed to put two kids through college, support the family through difficult times.
Well, while following some pretty straightforward rules.
That's the amazing part. It's the discipline behind them. Georgette treated saving almost like a mandatory tax on herself.
A tax. How much?
Her core rule was saving 20% of her cash income every single week. No excuses.
Wow. Okay.
And for investing, really strict diversification. No more than 5% in any one stock or bond.
5%, that's low.
Very. And no more than 20% in any one sector.
Like tech or finance.
Exactly. The only exception she allowed was real estate, up to 33%. And she focused on dividend-paying large-cap stocks.
So big, stable companies that pay you back regularly.
Precisely. And secure, stable bonds, think government bonds, that kind of thing. Predictable interest.
Okay, but here's the kicker.
This is the key. She never, ever touched the principal. She only lived off the dividends and the interest.
That mental shift, that reframe.
Yeah.
Treating it like an ironclad rule, not just, oh, I'll try to save. That must be what made the difference.
Absolutely. That consistency over, 55 years, it let compounding just work its magic. It proved that sticking with it beats trying to time the market. Her performance was remarkable through all sorts of economic conditions.
So let's tie this back to that $28 lunch idea.
Yeah.
Imagine taking, say, just 15% of your salary starting at age 25, and you just consistently put it into something simple, like an S&P 500 index fund.
Which, just to clarify for everyone, is basically buying a tiny piece of the 500 biggest U.S. companies all at once. Super simple.
Right. Super diversified automatically. History suggests if you do that, you could potentially end up with over, $1.5 million by age 65.
It's staggering, isn't it? And that's why O'Leary champions simple index investing. He's seen it's incredibly hard for regular folks to beat the S&P 500 consistently over time.
So why bother trying to pick individual stocks?
Exactly. It requires a certain humility. Most people think they can outsmart the market.
Guilty.
We all are sometimes. But the data doesn't really back that up for most individual investors. Georgette's way was about steady, predictable growth, minimizing risk, letting time to do the heavy lifting.
Okay, so that discipline, that never outspend yourself idea,
Yeah,
it seems to run through everything he talks about.
it really does.
And maybe nowhere is it more blunt than when he discusses probably the biggest purchase most of us make, a house.
Ah, yes, the house rule. He's got a very strict 1/3 rule for housing.
And third,
Your mortgage payment, plus taxes, plus maintenance costs, all of it together should never exceed 1/3 of your gross income.
never more than a third.
Never. He warns about buying too much house, especially now with interest rates bouncing around. He sees people who bought huge places when rates were low
And now they're refinancing.
and getting, as he puts it, screwed. Their housing costs jump to 60, 70, even 80% of their income. It's a trap.
And he also points out, owning a home isn't necessarily the first investment you should make, right? Especially if you're single.
Right. Unless it's specifically for your family, or maybe it's an income property you're renting out. It might not be the smartest first move. It's all part of that core idea
Yeah.
to never outspend yourself. Not on any 30 or 60-day cycle.
He tells that story about the billionaire woman.
Oh, yeah, that's a wild one.
This incredibly wealthy woman just bleeding hundreds of thousands of dollars a week, and she didn't even realize it.
Because she lacked that basic discipline. It just shows this isn't just for people starting out. It applies to everyone, no matter how much money you have.
It's almost counterintuitive, isn't it? That massive wealth doesn't automatically protect you from bad money habits.
Not at all. It highlights that understanding your cash flow, living within your means, ideally well below your means, is fundamental. And he's just as blunt about debt for luxury stuff, watches, fancy cars.
What does he say?
Just, there's so much stuff you don't need. It's about discipline, making choices to keep your money working for you, not disappearing on things that don't build wealth.
That discipline theme keeps coming back. Okay, let's shift to maybe the most controversial application of this discipline: relationships, marriage.
Yes, he holds nothing back here.
He believes who you marry is everything for financial success. That's a huge statement.
It is. And he says point blank, most marriages can survive infidelity,
Really?
but they cannot survive financial stress. He actually views marriage almost like a business.
Oh, business.
Yep. And he says, maybe provocatively, that money is the first child in that business.
Money is the first child. Wow.
And divorce, he calls it the stupidest thing you can ever do financially because of the massive geometric loss of wealth. Up to 2/3 can vanish through liquidation, taxes. It compounds the damage.
You know, he thinks most divorces boil down to financial incompatibility.
Primarily, yes. That's his argument, which leads to his rather direct dating advice.
The third date rule.
The third date rule. Talk about financial goals. Do your due diligence, as he puts it.
Due diligence on a date.
Okay.
Okay. And he has these 5 love languages of money.
Yeah, and they're not the romantic kind. There's the mooch.
Always lets you pay.
Right. The spenderholic, can't control impulses. The loafer avoids responsibility. The thief, well, that's obvious.
That last one.
The meanie, that's his preferred type.
Marry a meanie. Why?
Because the meanie is balanced. They live within their means. They're careful. They avoid the financial stress that, in his view, destroys relationships. So marry a meanie, build a stable financial life together.
It's pragmatic. Definitely not romantic, but pragmatic.
Yep, very pragmatic. It's about finding someone whose financial values align with yours for long-term stability. Cynical? Maybe. But he sees it as setting yourself up for success.
Okay, staying with money, but moving from, stocks and bonds to the digital world, crypto. O'Leary's surprisingly bullish, isn't he?
He really is. He sees it as potentially becoming the 12th sector of the S&P, like as significant as finance or tech eventually.
So not just a fringe thing anymore.
Not in his view. But he makes a key distinction. There are digital payment systems like stablecoins, USDC.
Those are the ones pegged to, like, the US dollar.
Exactly. Backed by things like US Treasury bills, designed to be stable for transactions. And then there are the more speculative assets like Bitcoin, which he views more like digital gold.
An asset to hold.
Right. And his own portfolio shows this thinking. He has about 19.1% in various crypto assets and infrastructure.
Just under his 20% sector rule.
Precisely. It's not wild speculation for him. It's about acknowledging its growing role, especially in things like payment processing and its potential to boost productivity in other areas.
All right, let's pivot now. From personal finance, let's talk about the entrepreneurial path. O'Leary says every entrepreneur has a defining moment. For him, it was getting fired.
On his very first day of his first real job, at an ice cream store.
What happened?
It's a classic O'Leary story. He was asked to scrape gum off the floor. He refused.
Why refuse?
Apparently, a girl he liked was working nearby, and he was embarrassed, didn't want her to see him kneeling down doing that. So the manager just said, "You're fired."
Ouch, first day.
Brutal. But he said in that instant, it just clicked. He realized there are 2 kinds of people in the world. Those who own the store and those who scrape the shit off the floor.
Wow. Stark.
Very. And right then, he decided he wanted to be an owner. That moment basically ignited his whole entrepreneurial drive.
And he has that pretty controversial idea about who can actually be an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, he thinks only about 1/3 of people really have what it takes to be successful entrepreneurs.
Only 1/3. That seems low. Why does he think that? Is it something you're born with?
He seems to think it's a mix. Certain traits are maybe innate, like a higher tolerance for risk, an intense focus, but discipline is learned. And he also mentions karma or luck playing a role.
What about the other 2/3?
He's clear they can have great, successful lives as employees. Very fulfilling, but they will never be free, in quite the same way an entrepreneur who makes it big might be.
Financial freedom, he means.
Exactly. And for young people wanting to start something, he has some practical advice.
Yeah.
Work for someone else for about 24 months first, in a sector you actually love. learn the ropes.
Get that foundational knowledge.
Right, especially when you're young, in your 20s, because you kind of need to burn a few years failing anyway, as he puts it. Learn from mistakes early.
Makes sense. Learn on someone else's dime first, maybe.
Something like that.
And speaking of foundational ideas, Steve Jobs was a huge influence on him, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Even though O'Leary admits Jobs was difficult.
Immensely influential, particularly Jobs' concept of the signal-to-noise ratio.
Signal to noise. What does that mean exactly?
For Jobs, the signal was the absolute vital stuff. Like 80% of your time needs to be focused on the top 3 to 5 things you have to get done in the next 18 hours.
18 hours. That's specific.
That's the intensity. Anything that distracts from those core tasks, anything that doesn't directly advance those goals, that's noise.
Just noise. Cut it out.
Cut it out. Think about Jobs saying, they don't know what they want till I tell them. Total focus. O'Leary points to Elon Musk as someone who's almost 100% signal. Even Jeff Bezos, apparently, stops making big decisions after 1 p.m. because he feels the noise was too high later in the day.
So for you listening, O'Leary thinks this ability, distinguishing signal from noise, it's like the core skill.
He calls it the essence of the great entrepreneur, the great manager, the great leader. Can you figure out what truly matters right now? And can you ruthlessly block out everything else? That's the game.
Fierce prioritization.
And execution. It's about judgment and then just getting it done.
Okay, so beyond that focus, O'Leary talks about having this like spidey sense for spotting winners, right? Even before they speak.
Yeah, he calls it their aura, how they carry themselves, eye contact, posture, dress. He claims he can tell, like 99% of the time, just from that initial vibe if someone has potential.
99%. Okay. But aura isn't enough, surely. What else does he look for when someone's actually pitching him?
Right, the aura gets you in the door. Then come the 3 things you must achieve to be successful. First, can you articulate the idea clearly, concisely, in 90 seconds or less?
The elevator pitch.
Essentially. Second, why you? Why are you or your team the right people to pull this off? What's your experience, your track record, your grit? Have you learned from failures?
Makes sense.
And third, the one he calls the killer. Do you know your numbers?
The numbers.
Market size, growth potential, gross margin, who your competitors are, your break-even point, all of it. If you don't know these cold, well, his words are, you deserve to burn in hell.
Okay, so aura gets you noticed, numbers keep you funded.
Got it.
And how does he apply this when he's hiring for his own teams? Is it just aura and numbers?
He has a really interesting, maybe unconventional approach. He doesn't just hire people full-time right away. He brings them on as contractors first for maybe 4 to 6 months. Pays them well, maybe even more than a salary, but no benefits, no stock options initially.
Why do that?
He wants to see if they can actually execute. Can they deliver on specific projects, specific mandates, without needing constant hand-holding? He doesn't care where they live or when they do the work, just can they get it done?
Results-oriented.
Very. And he actually prefers what he calls eclectic people.
Eclectic?
People with passions outside of work. Maybe they ride motorcycles, play guitar, whatever. He finds they often outperform the robots, the ones who just clock in and out. And he focuses way more on execution than, say, likability or softness.
That fits. And he's noticed something about women-led companies in his portfolio, hasn't he?
Yeah, a distinct trend. He says the companies run by women hit their growth targets something like 90% of the time.
90%. Compared to men.
Compared to about 65% for companies run by men in his portfolio.
Wow. Why does he think that is?
He suggests a couple of things. Women leaders often set more realistic, achievable goals, perhaps, and they tend to be better at retaining their teams, which leads to more stability and consistent growth.
Interesting. And it's not just about observing others, right? He learned something himself from one of his female CEOs.
Oh, yeah, a great story. She basically told him, Kevin, you talk too much.
Direct.
Very. She said he talked 2/3 of the time and listened only 1/3. She challenged him to flip that ratio.
Listen 2/3, talk 1/3.
Exactly. He tried it and found he became way more effective. He started picking up crucial information he would have missed otherwise. He even uses silence now in negotiations and litigation, just waits for the other side to fill the void.
Let them reveal their hand.
It's a powerful technique. Uncomfortable sometimes, but effective. Clearly something he learned to value.
Okay, let's look ahead. AI, artificial intelligence. Mr. Wonderful has some strong views here. He thinks it's bigger than the internet.
That's his take, yeah. He sees absolutely immense opportunities opening up across every single sector because of AI.
Is he using it himself? Or just talking about it?
Oh, he's actively using it. In his wine business, for instance, AI helps them predict demand with uncanny accuracy.
How so?
He can tell you, like, for women aged 44 to 64 in Southern Florida, the top wine preference is Moscato. That lets them manage inventory, plan production, cuts way down on traditional market research costs.
It's pretty specific.
Right. Another example, making commercials. They use these huge high-res digital walls in studios now, linked to AI.
Like green screens, but way better.
Exactly. Creates hyper-realistic backgrounds. He said they can shoot a complex commercial in maybe 4 hours for a tiny fraction of the old cost. They can even generate AI avatars of him to do reshoots later if needed.
Without him even being there.
Right. So, yes, he acknowledges there will be job disruption, but he believes the productivity gains are just going to be massive, overwhelming.
And he connects AI to this bigger picture, right?
Mhm.
Geopolitics, technology dominance, the queen bee idea.
Yeah, he borrows that analogy from Steve Jobs. The queen bee is the core technology, the essential chip.
Like the processor.
Exactly. And the honeybees are the software developers, the AI community, everyone building applications on top of that core chip technology.
Okay.
O'Leary's argument is stark. Whoever controls the queen bee chip technology, and crucially, fosters the biggest community of honeybee developers around it, will dominate future industries, even warfare.
Dominate globally.
That's the implication. And this is why he argues against completely shutting down markets like China for U.S. chip makers.
Why? That seems counterintuitive too.
Because he argues if you cut them off, you force them to develop their own queen bee, like Huawei is trying to do. His view is you'd rather sell your chips everywhere,
Yeah.
even to adversaries.
So they build their software on your platform.
Precisely. You want everyone developing their honey using your hive. That way, you maintain control, even if they're building powerful applications. It's a very strategic, maybe cynical view of tech power.
Fascinating. Okay, shifting from global dominance to something more personal. Branding. Especially for creators, people in the public eye. What's O'Leary's advice on building your brand?
Authenticity. That's the absolute key for him. He says, your real value, your real brand, it's your followers, your audience.
So you have to protect that relationship.
Absolutely. Which means only endorsing products or services you genuinely use and believe in yourself. He talks about turning down huge multi-million-dollar deals because the product wasn't something he'd actually used.
That takes conviction.
It does. But he believes that transparency, even when things go wrong, even during turmoil, actually bonds your audience closer to you. It builds trust, which is ultimately more valuable than any single deal. It's long-term credibility over short-term cash.
Makes sense. Okay, last big area, happiness and maybe longevity.
Yeah.
How does Mr. Wonderful define happiness? It's probably not just about money, right?
You might be surprised. He defines happiness as not a destination, it's a journey. Okay, that part sounds familiar. But the journey is defined by consistently achieving your goals.
Happiness is achieving goals consistently.
That's his definition. He also talks about feeling happier as he's gotten older, largely because he can now allocate his time almost exclusively to things he wants to do, which makes you think, are you driven through your day or are you dragged? He's all about being driven.
And longevity. How does that fit in?
He stresses starting early. Focus on diet, sleep, exercise, starting in your 30s. It's an investment in your future self, giving you potentially a longer, healthier runway to keep achieving those goals.
Investing in your health, just like your finances.
Exactly. And this all ties back to intuition and sacrifice, too. Trust your gut. If a deal feels like noise, even if it pays well, maybe walk away. It could taint your brand, distract you from your real goals.
Sacrifice comes in too.
Big time. He's very clear. Achieving really ambitious goals almost always requires sacrifice, especially early on. He says there's no balance in life for a true entrepreneur starting out. You give things up time, maybe relationships, hobbies, to build something significant. It really challenges that whole work-life balance ideal, doesn't it?
It definitely does. A very stark perspective.
Mhm.
Hashtag Haturate. Wow. Okay, so we've really taken a deep dive into the world, according to Kevin O'Leary today.
Mr. Wonderful's rules for life, yeah.
We covered that incredible power of disciplined saving, starting with his mother, Georgette.
That relentless focus on signal versus noise, cutting out distractions.
Knowing your number is cold. Absolutely critical.
The surprisingly huge role your life partner plays in your financial success or failure.
Yeah, marry a meanie. and the value of true authenticity in building a brand that lasts.
It really does seem to circle back to a core idea, doesn't it? If happiness for him is that journey of constantly hitting your goals, and every single choice you make is either signal moving you towards those goals or noise pulling you away.
Then what does that actually mean for how you're going to spend, say, your next 18 hours?
Exactly. It puts the focus right back on you, the listener.
So maybe something to think about. What's your signal-to-noise ratio right now? Are you really focused on the things that drive your personal, your professional happiness journey? Lots to consider there.